This episode of the Lutheran Cartographer is brought to you by Audible. Get a free trial offer along with a free audiobook at lutherancartographer.com/audible. The Lutheran Cartographer, episode 29. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different areas. Today we are joined by Pastor Kevin Johnson, who is the pastor of Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Carlisle, Iowa. Pastor Johnson, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
So help orient us geographically. Where exactly are we in Iowa, and where are we in relation to maybe some of the larger cities that our listeners may know about?
Okay, yeah. Iowa is smack dab in the middle of the flyover. We're kind of in the heartland, the Midwest, and Carlisle is right outside of Des Moines. We're about 20 minutes from downtown Des Moines, so Des Moines is the capital of Iowa. Right there at the intersection of I-80 and I-235, I-80 and I-35 going across the country there. You can't get much more Middle America than us.
Okay, excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in the middle of Middle America.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm a native Iowan. I was born in Fort Dodge, which is about 90 miles north and a little west of Des Moines, and grew up there. Went to senior high, met my future wife in high school, in German class of all places. Did not grow up in a Lutheran family. My parents weren't going to church. They were nominally Baptist at the time. It was thanks to a neighbor, and I was friends with his kids, and particularly his son. And they started inviting me to church and Sunday school, VBS, got me to go to confirmation there. It was an old ALC church. So it was St. Olaf, which is a good, solid Norwegian Synod church or ALC church. And after that, I got into high school, met my wife again in German class. She was a Heierhof, so a good German girl, and she was Missouri Synod. So, right there, you might think we were star-crossed lovers, in a sense, because it used to be a pretty big distinction between, the ELCA, or what would become an ELCA church, and a Missouri Synod church. And even 30 years ago, that was already kind of a distinction that was happening. After graduation, I ended up going in the Marine Corps. I married her after I came home. I'd been stationed in North Carolina. I was air crew on C-130, so I flew quite a bit. I got to see a lot of the world at that time, although I've never really lived anywhere for any significant amount of time except for Iowa, other than when I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. Again, came home, went to Iowa State, got a degree in architecture. Was happily practicing architecture. I joined the Air Guard, so I was serving there, and eventually in 1999 I was hearing a lot of recruitment by the Synod for pastors, and I thought, if they need pastors, maybe I should consider doing this. And so I went and talked to my pastor, talked to my wife. And her response was, well, I always thought I'd be married to a pastor. I just didn't know how it was going to be you. And next thing I know, we were selling everything, and I had been practicing architecture, sold my part of my partnership in the firm, went to St. Louis, and was studying there at the seminary until September of 2001. My Air Guard unit got activated. I withdrew from the seminary, and ended up being on active duty until 2002, and then go out on vicarage. And I received a vicarage assignment to here at Carlisle, Holy Cross in Carlisle, 17 years ago. And then they called me as pastor, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. So then you were activated right around September, like in response to September 11th and all that stuff then.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad you made it through and that you're now where you are. So tell us a little bit more about Carlisle and what you like best about the area.
Yeah, when I was growing up here, in fact, I lived in Des Moines, practiced architecture in Des Moines up until going to seminary. So I'm very familiar with the Des Moines area, which Carlisle is just a hop, skip, and a jump from. And I didn't even know Carlisle was down here. I was so focused on, I was working downtown. We had a home in Beaverdale, which is a nice little urban neighborhood, old neighborhood in Des Moines, but very nice neighborhood. So I didn't even know Carlisle was around. And I had no idea that I'd be called there eventually as pastor. That was, was not even on my radar at all. If you remember the McCoy septuplets, they were there was a whole lot of media coverage of the McCoy septuplets, 20 years ago or so. That's kind of Carlisle's claim to fame.
Okay.
They grew up. So even when I took the call here in 2003, they were just young kids. They were the same age as my kids. So that was kind of a big thing in Carlisle. Carlisle is a small town. I think there's about 2,500 people. We are growing a little bit. We're on the southeast side of Des Moines, which is not the prosperous, big, sprawling part of town where all the new stuff is happening. That's all out west. There's the western suburbs, Urbandale, Clive, Waukee, Adair, moving out that way to the west. We're sort of a little forgotten pocket down here. And the church was built in '63 as kind of a mission plant. It's always been kind of small. I don't think we've ever had more than 120 people in service, a couple hundred members. And just kind of quietly minding our own business down here on the southeast side of Des Moines. And just a little treasure down here. It's like living in a small town, but you have all the amenities of Des Moines that, again, are like 15, 20 minutes away. Hospitals, shopping centers, restaurants. Just a great place to get a taste of kind of rural Iowa and at the same time have all the amenities of the city.
Okay, great. So then it's got, as you were just saying, it's got that kind of in-between feel of you're close to Des Moines, so you have the access to those more city-oriented things, but it's also this, as you put it, forgotten pocket of like, maybe not sort of idyllic, but more rural and more small-town feeling?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, everybody kind of knows everybody. You feel very safe walking down the streets. Kids, our church has a little playground, so lots of neighborhood kids come and play there. You can. Okay, this is going to sound crazy, but you literally can leave your house unlocked, the keys in the car. I mean, I don't know if there are too many places left like this, and maybe I'm being a little bit nostalgic, but we've never had any problems. I mean, there's problems. There's for a while, I think we might have had a bit of a drug problem in the area, but that's things have kind of worked out. Just a really wonderful small town atmosphere. Yep.
Great. So as you were just saying, no place is perfect. What are some of the challenges about the area? You mentioned the drug problem. So tell us a little bit more about the challenges, whether it's that or something else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make a big deal out of that.
Sure.
I mean, but like I said earlier, Des Moines is kind of at that crossroads between two major interstates. So Des Moines itself does have some drug, gang violence, that kind of stuff. I mean, you like any city, you have to be aware of the good neighborhoods, the bad neighborhoods, kind of mark and avoid. Be aware of your surroundings. But overall, even Des Moines itself there's so many nice neighborhoods. I mean, downtown, they're revitalizing the downtown. There's fantastic restaurants. There's a lot of loft apartment living for young people down there. We love going downtown. I worked downtown when I was an architect, and that was before the revitalization. So I love seeing the renovation and some of the new buildings, and it's really, really a fun time in Des Moines. Again, great restaurants. You go out west, the western suburbs are pretty much what you consider, I think, typical American suburbs. New homes, nice schools, family oriented, but the challenges, one of the challenges, okay, in a very physical way, the summers here are super muggy. They're also very buggy. There are tornadoes. In fact, we had some. It wasn't bad weather, but we had some first kind of severe weather of the season. Some thunderstorms. So we have that to contend with. Winters are harsh, not as harsh as Minnesota, but we do get lots of days that are sub-zero, lots of blowing snow and blizzards, and we do have our share of snow days, and and that kind of a thing. But I'll tell you, aside from that, the weather's pretty nice. Iowa has its golden moments too. But other challenges. I was asking my daughter about this, and she's 19. And she had one of her friends over last night, and we were sitting around talking outside on one of the really nice days when there weren't a lot of bugs. And, they're saying, one of the things that's a real challenge is finding a Christian boyfriend, or finding a Lutheran boyfriend. Or I shouldn't just say boyfriend. I mean, for whatever, I have young men in the congregation coming and telling me the same thing. Where are the nice young girls, And if you happen to be a liturgical, confessional Lutheran, now the field's getting pretty narrow,
Yeah.
I think there's a perception that it's hard to find someone, to find as a suitable companion, here in Iowa. And if you get out in the rural areas, where the rural population is even shrinking further, it gets even tighter. Des Moines is growing, and the surrounding area is growing. So there are lots and lots of young people. But again, finding that place where there's a church or some other place where you can find, again, young, suitable people of the opposite sex to look for as a potential husband or wife. Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So just the fact that, as you were just saying, the population is kind of shrinking in rural areas, and also, unfortunately, as we see more and more of even LCMS churches moving away from the good, solid, liturgical, historical approach to the faith, there's fewer and fewer people of the opposite sex to get to know and to marry.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about kind of your experience and how you'd contrast it with where you are now. So as you mentioned, you've kind of seen the world in the Marine Corps, but weren't kind of solidly rooted in any place in particular. Is there anything that you noticed kind of on your travels that you would contrast with your experience in Iowa in terms of either the culture or just the way of living, either for good or for ill?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Iowa, we're generally pretty conservative. Polk County, where Des Moines is located, Warren County, where Carlisle is located, those are kind of progressive pockets within, Iowa. Up in Story County with Ames, or over where Iowa City is, of course, you've got more progressive pockets there, because of the universities and stuff. But overall, I'd say, there's some very traditional values still at work here in Iowa that maybe don't exist quite the same way out in the Northwest or something. Now, when I've traveled, like when I was in North Carolina, again, being in a military community, it's still relatively conservative and that kind of a thing. I have had a chance to travel and spend some limited amount of time. I was in Okinawa for 6 months and spent some time in Japan and also in Korea. But again, it was kind of hard to really make any kind of comparison there. I guess one of the things I have found, I also spent a couple of weeks over in Kenya about 10 years ago. I got a chance to teach a short class over at the Kisumu Matango Teachers College and Seminary there in Kisumu, and I got to teach the Augsburg Confession to a group of pastors, which was awesome.
Fantastic.
One of the things that they said to me was one Sunday while we were preaching, or I was preaching, and I got done with the service, and the people of the congregation came up, and we were out in the rural area of Kenya there, and they came up and they said, we didn't know how a rich white American pastor would be able to preach in a way that we would understand or connect with. And I kind of looked at him and I said, well, I didn't say anything really different than I would have said to my own congregation back home, right? The law is still the law that shows us our sins and condemns us, shows us how we need to live. And the gospel still shows us our Savior. And what he gives to us is his gifts, that forgiveness of sins, life, and forgiveness, and our salvation. And then that's universal, whether you're in, rural Kenya or rural Iowa or downtown Des Moines, or, I also got a chance to go up to Upper Norway for a few weeks, deployed one time and got to stay in a small little community up in Norway. And again, people are people. We want to be loved, and we want to have a roof over our heads, and we want to have good food on the table. We want to have a chance to party and celebrate with our friends, and you know what? And we need the same promises of the gospel. So I don't know. In some ways, I found that people are people, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess, especially as we get in our Lutheran community, I think that Lutherans who have that similar grounding in the Word of God, in our confession, and in the practice of that faith, boy, we've got so much in common. It doesn't really matter too much where you are. Maybe I'm being a bit naive in saying that, or maybe a bit idealistic, but I really do think there's a lot to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where, as you just said, that we're all Christians living under the law, and we all need the gospel.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a moment to thank our sponsor. A lot of us have a lot of downtime right now, and there's been no better time to start a new audiobook with a free trial from Audible. You get a free audiobook of your choice that you get to keep, even if you decide not to continue with their service. So far as books you can check out, I'd recommend looking into Luther's Bondage to the Will. That's on Audible, that you can pick up as your free audiobook. But if you don't like that one, you can always choose a different one from their plethora of options. So go ahead and go to lutherancartographer.com/audible to get your free audiobook today. Let's get back to our guest. All right, so now as we think a little bit more about Carlisle and what it's like there, tell us a little bit about what it's like to raise a family. You mentioned you have a 19-year-old daughter. Tell us a little bit more about what it was like to raise her and the rest of your family there.
Yeah, I think Iowa has traditionally had a good reputation for a good school system. And I think that's still pretty much the case. I mean, again, especially in the smaller communities, I think the school system's very good. Athletics, of course, is our little community really centers around high school sports. Yeah, and again, the community is safe. People know each other, so that's a benefit. We homeschool,
Excellent.
and we did that mostly because, as a pastor's family, that gave us more flexibility with our time. Because as a pastor, I'm working on the holidays when everybody else is taking off. Gave us a chance to kind of, again, have more flexibility with our time off together as a family. And to be honest, homeschooling is growing in the Des Moines area and in Iowa. We have a large number of families in our church. I think we have 8 or 10 families that homeschool in our little congregation. I mean, we have about 170 members, I think, and about 90 or so on a Sunday. We've got a lot of young families that homeschool, and so that's nice to have that community. But raising a family, in the Des Moines area in particular, many opportunities. Great museums. We've got just a beautiful art museum, the Des Moines Art Center, which has 3 world-renowned architects that have done additions to it. We've got the state capitol, which is wonderful for touring, and the state historical museum, which has an amazing collection of Civil War flags of the Iowa regiments that served in the war. So if a person has that interest and that connection to history, that's there. There's wonderful city parks. Now, granted, we don't have oceans, we don't have beaches to speak of, we don't have mountains to climb, but we've got wonderful parks. We've got wonderful hiking trails. We've got a lot of the old railroad system has been converted into bike trails. Wonderful opportunities to go out and walk and bike. And there's a great trail next to our house or to the church where we see deer and fox and all kinds of birds of different species throughout the summer. So lots of great stuff. And like I said, people I think in Iowa are generally pretty friendly. They'll smile at you and wave. They make eye contact. They're not afraid to actually say hi, how's it going, kind of a thing. So I think overall it's just a pretty nice atmosphere to grow up in, raise your family. I know for a lot of Iowans, after high school, you leave, get out of Dodge, literally, and But then after you go away, you realize, you know what, Iowa still has a lot to offer. So I think a lot of people do come back.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've already started talking about some of the cool things to see and do there. You mentioned the museum and other things. What else would you like to highlight to our listeners if they're coming through Des Moines or through Carlisle? What would you say? You got to check this out.
Um, I mean, if you're coming through Carlisle, and you happen to be here on a Sunday or a Wednesday evening, stop by the church. Holy Cross, stop by and say hi. Come to service. Do me the favor of letting me know ahead of time so that I can, be prepared for visitors, and we can deal with explaining to you our community practice, that kind of a thing. But yeah, we'd love to see people, visit our little church. There's Des Moines itself. Again, it's full of great restaurants. One of my favorite. My wife doesn't particularly like to go there, but when we get the pastors together for a winkle or around Reformation, or we have a study group that we host, there's a little restaurant downtown called Hessen House, which is a German restaurant. It's in a converted train depot probably from going back to the 1940s. So it has a real sort of German, Gast House or Berghof kind of feel to it. Big wide open spaces, big table, and they have an incredible selection of Lutheran beverages, lots of German beers on tap, and good food. So that's kind of a fun thing. But boy, there's just, again, there's Thai restaurants, there's all kinds of lots of Mexican restaurants. We've got a very vibrant Hispanic community in the Des Moines area. Sports. There's the Iowa Wild, which is a hockey team. We've got the Barnstormers. We don't have any pro teams with big names, but we love our Iowa Cubs, which are a farm team for the Chicago Cubs. And there's just a ton of stuff to do. It's a little low key. It's not the big city with every conceivable thing, but we do get some really wonderful shows at the Civic Center. Hamilton's been here, Wicked. We get wonderful concerts if family's into that kind of a thing. So really, I think Des Moines just got a lot to offer.
Great. So what else would you say to let's back up and talk to the person that might be thinking about moving to a more rural area. So right now, hopefully by the time you hear this, dear listener, things will have changed. But right now, on the 16th of May, we're going through the coronavirus, and a lot of states, especially the more urban and blue states, are still kind of locked down. And a lot of people at this time are really thinking about, maybe I should move to a more rural area. What would your thoughts, both general advice and pastoral thoughts, be for somebody saying, I'm thinking about getting out of Dodge?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you go to a very rural community, let's say, 60 miles or 90 miles from Des Moines, then obviously you're going to have more of that small town culture. I mean, you may not have a Walmart, you may not have a Starbucks. There might be just a Casey's, which is kind of the local gas station / convenience store. But you know what? You're within driving distance of something. But if you like that quiet small town life, it's there, and I think the cost of living is pretty good. A decent salary is going to buy you a nice house. And especially in this age of working from home with the internet and stuff, a person might be able to have a really nice living in a rural area. Also, particularly we're in Iowa District West, and this is probably true of a lot of our districts. The rural churches tend to be the more conservative, confessional, liturgical services, or churches, I mean. And, so you can pretty much probably count on that if you're moving into one of the more rural communities. So and I think this is a pretty big consideration. Don't assume that if you move to Des Moines and you go to the nearest Missouri Synod church, that it's going to be what you would consider a liturgical and, confessional church. We probably have 18 Missouri Synod congregations in the Des Moines area, and a lot of our members move to where there's a good school or their work, which is on the west side or downtown, and they find out that, hey, the nearest church feels more like your basic non-denominational Baptist church in terms of its teaching and practice than the church that they were coming from or looking for. So you just have to be a little careful. But I guess it can also be seen as a plus. There's a wide range of worship styles and practices in the Des Moines area, everything from very, very contemporary to very, very liturgical and traditional. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a good thing. It might be for some people that you've got a lot of options. Des Moines is just a city that has a lot going for it. And in the Lutheran community, quite a bit of diversity, and that doesn't even include all the ELCA churches that are in town or in the Des Moines area too. Yeah.
I see. So kind of the idea of looking before you leap or researching before you leap.
I think so. Yep.
Okay. So let's elaborate a little more on what it's like to be Lutheran there. You've already touched on it in terms of what it's like with as you just talked about, the diversity there, but there's also the part that I'm particularly curious about is kind of the general, how it fits in kind of the more general culture. On the coast here, I know a lot of people think of, well, all the Midwest is super conservative Christian, but that isn't necessarily the case. What's the general culture, and how does Lutheranism fit into it?
Yeah. Iowa is heavily ethnically Scandinavian and German, right? And so, Scandinavian churches, traditionally Lutheran, German churches, traditionally Lutheran. So there is culturally a lot of Lutheran history in Iowa. I mean, there's also a ton of Methodists and Roman Catholics as well. Also, a lot of non-denominational Protestant influence going on now as a lot of people have moved from more mainstream, again, Methodist, liberal Lutheran, even Missouri Synod, into more of the non-denominational churches and stuff. Culturally, again, still pretty conservative, pretty traditional. I think that's not a stereotype. I think that's probably pretty true. But there's also a lot of people who used to be Lutheran, right? There's a lot of people, particularly in my generation. I'm at the tail end of the baby boom, so I'm a little older probably than maybe a lot of your listeners even. But in my generation, I had almost 30 kids in my confirmation class, and I don't know if any of them are still going to church or Lutheran. I don't have contact with them, so I don't mean to judge, but just in general, in my age group, when I talk to a lot of my high school people, I graduated high school and things, a lot of them are, oh yeah, I used to go to church or I used to be Lutheran, and you just see a lot of that, unfortunately. And so I think that yes, most people would consider themselves Christian. Most people would consider themselves, good people who are living a moral, upright life. We're not hurting our neighbor. I think that's probably, pretty much there. I think there's still a lot of people who, even though they don't go to church, do, again, consider themselves Christian. Unfortunately, we have not seen a whole lot of the C&E Christians any longer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I do think that there is a shift that people are saying, hey, look, if I'm not coming to church regularly, I don't know if there's any point, even though I think they still consider themselves Christians. Our church, if we do have that bump in attendance over Christmas and Easter, it's because families are coming together. There's not that there are people we haven't seen for ages that suddenly reappear. That just doesn't seem to happen as much anymore, at least in our church.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so now as we start to kind of wind down the podcast, I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to point our listeners to the things that you'd like to, whether it's your church's website, places to follow you online. What would you like to point our listeners to?
Yeah, check out our webpage, which is holycrosscarlisle.org. It's not super complicated. There's only a few things on there. Mostly a link to our sermons and services that have been streaming, particularly during this time of social isolation. That links you to our YouTube channel. And so you can check out our YouTube channel, Holy Cross Carlisle. And then you've got services again and sermons, Bible studies, and things that you can watch. Also, I really promote Issues, etc. I think that's a wonderful resource. We support them. And so we're part of their 300 club, and so people can find us that way. Also, another resource that I don't know if a lot of your listeners are aware of is LutheranLiturgy.org.
Okay.
If you type in LutheranLiturgy.org, it gives you a website where you type in an area or a zip code, and it will tell you whether that church is liturgical and whether they're using the Lutheran service book and which service is their primary service. Do they offer communion every Sunday? Do they have a crucifix? I mean, it gets fairly specific. But that's a really good resource, especially if somebody's looking to move or even going on vacation. You can kind of look ahead on that website, and then you can contact the pastor and let them know you're going to be in town. And I have people calling ahead all the time who are moving into the area, and they kind of question me a little bit and want to find out a little bit more before they even move into the Des Moines area, so they kind of know what they're getting into.
Okay, excellent. So, listeners, you can find all that stuff at the show notes page. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/29. And before I ask my last question, I do want to ask you, since we are in this kind of unprecedented time of some states sheltering in place, others open, what are things like in the Des Moines area and for you guys?
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. Des Moines itself was lagging behind the rest of the state because it does have a higher percentage of cases of coronavirus and hospitalized and also deaths in the state. It's one of the higher afflicted counties. Mm-hmm. And we're just south, just a couple miles south of the county line. So most of our members are coming down from the Des Moines. So we're trying to practice social distancing. Church services are limited. We've got the pews spread out, and people let me know if they're coming to church, and then we have them sit so they're 6 feet apart, which is awkward. But hey, it does allow members to come and be able to receive the sacrament, and so we're trying to take precautions. And but on the other hand, if you're going up into Des Moines, they recommend wearing a mask, and we're still doing that. But things are opening up in the state. And so we're actually thinking about adding, possibly in the next couple of weeks, another service to accommodate more of our members as we do open up more, to allow them to start getting back to church. Again, we're not limited in numbers, but you're limited in the volume of the space of the sanctuary, so that we can have people spread out and maintain that good social distance until hopefully this thing passes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Pastor Johnson. What are your final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I would just encourage people, again, to, enjoy the church where they're at, right? And their friends and family that are as part of that church. If you have questions, don't be afraid to go talk to your pastor, even if you're wondering what he's doing and why, or not doing and should be doing. Go talk to them, because your pastor hopefully loves to explain these things, especially things about the liturgy and about our confession. Make sure that if you can't go to church, that you are finding good stuff to stream as you're isolated at home. Again, I'd suggest Issues, etc. You've got all that time on your hands to listen to good stuff. Also, check out Higher Things. I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges is finding that person of the opposite sex that you might be able to have a long-time relationship with. And Higher Things is a good place for young people to kind of get that good foundation, and also hopefully interact with some other young people that are like-minded. Just remember that the Lord is with you, that He gives you His unchanging Word, that you have that incredible gift of the sacrament to participate in when you're able to come together. And unfortunately, if you can't come together, I should say, because we can't come together, perhaps, don't forget that you're baptized. In your baptism, you have everything: life, forgiveness, salvation. It's yours, a present reality, even if you aren't able to come to church right now. Yeah?
Amen. Thank you again for your time today. God's peace.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, check out the show notes page at lutherancartographer.com I encourage you to check out that Audible offer at lutherancartographer.com/audible. Get a free audiobook, and you get to keep it at the end of the trial. Go ahead and subscribe to the show on iTunes and on Stitcher so you don't miss an episode. And until next time, I'm Nicholas Weber. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.